All right, it's 11 o'clock, or actually 10 o'clock where you're at. It's 11 o'clock Amsterdam time. So we already had another hour to prep. Happy to have everybody here on the call today. We are expecting more people to drop in as we go, but most people also register to receive the recording because we want to be mindful of everybody's busy agendas, without a doubt. Today we're talking about best practices for volunteer recruitment and retention. My name is Levi, or Levi in English, and I'm happy to host this session where we have Sally and Haley sharing their insights, expertise with us today. So without further ado, we'll head over to the program. A couple of friendly requests. Please keep your mic muted at all time, but that seems to be working well. Also, you can use the chat. There's an icon right below where you can share some of the questions that you might have. Would also be good for everybody to introduce themselves in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you work at, and what your favorite meal is. That would be great. You can keep your camera on or off. It's totally up to you. So if you didn't clean the living room or your bedroom, then it's completely fine. But we're happy to have everybody here and make it a good one. I'll do the introduction. It will be very short, promise. This is like a mental note for me. After that, we'll hand it over to Haley Williams, founder and CEO from Keystone Marketing. And afterwards, Sally Page, forgot the capital P. She's from Cambridge CVS and working with VolunteerCambs over the last longer than almost a year already, which is awesome. We'll also reserve some time for questions. If you have any pressing questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them if there's time. It's a pretty jam-packed program because we only wanted to reserve 60 minutes, but at the same time, make it as valuable as possible for you. And we'll end with the most important question of all. What do we do now that we've heard all these amazing examples? A quick introduction about DeedMob. Well, as I said, I'm Levi. I'm the CEO of DeedMob. And we help infrastructure organizations to better facilitate volunteering, making it more accessible, more future-proof. And we provide many of our partners with volunteer hubs to match volunteers with causes that they care about. All digital, accessible, but I think most of all, easy to use. So our partners run like a local volunteer hub. We have around 10 regional brokerage platforms. Take, for example, VolunteerCambs, Go for Hearts, some of the lovely people here, Get Involved Norfolk. But we also support the broader ecosystem. So from corporates to universities to grassroots movements, charities, you name it. Why do we do this? Why did we build technology to better match volunteers? Is that we believe that volunteering is vital to create meaningful change and build strong communities. We've been doing this since 2017, and we're so proud that we enable support from over 150,000 volunteers to over 60,000 community groups and causes. But still, what we hear is that many community organizations still struggle to recruit, to retain volunteers. So we still have a lot of work to do. What we also see is that, to me, it feels like volunteering is at a crossroads. And it's changing, and to quote Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, change is the only constant in life. So it has been changing since forever, and it will be changing in the future as well. So this inspiration session is to help everybody adapt to the new reality and prep for like a brighter future by showcasing all of the best practices that we do see within the sector. So view this as a different sound as opposed to all the headlines, which are all mostly doom and gloom. Number of volunteers is declining. Younger people having trouble to find their way into volunteering. So this session is meant to share the amazing work that is happening all across the sector. So an example from my own experience into why this is changing is a corporate volunteering activity that we did in the past few weeks together with the DeedMop team. It's part of our, what do we call this? Like an employee engagement policy. We have a DeedMop Gives Back program where we focus on team building activities and volunteering at local causes. So this is a food forest right next to Amsterdam Central Station. It's a 250-meter food forest. And we spend a few hours there doing hands-on work, removing some of the old bushes to make place for new growth. But while we were also talking with this community organization, there was a big need for skills-based support, engaging corporate sponsors in the neighborhood, managing the website. So we see there's a wide variety in ways that people can volunteer, and there's a wide variety of different stakeholders that are active within the ecosystem. So we talked about community support from local residents. We talked about the importance of nature education for city-based people, but we also talked about how difficult it is to measure impact, share the impact, convince everybody of the value of what they do. And one of the main reasons for not getting this done is there's so much to do, so little time. So a while back, we also mapped some of the different tasks that probably all of you are responsible for in whatever shape or form, from assessing needs within the sector to recruitment, screening, onboarding, supporting development. So I want to thank everybody for all the hard work that you're doing, and hopefully we can share some of the insights that will give you some of the needed inspiration to do and view things differently. Two people that I've met on my journey while working at DeedMop are Sally and Haley, both amazing people. The work that they've been doing and are doing still, I think, is truly a glowing best example, a best practice for not just volunteering in the UK, but volunteering in general. I know that they will never say this for themselves, but that's also one of the things that I'm trying to break, is this incredible feeling of modesty within the sector. So happy to have Sally and Haley both here to share this within 15 minutes. If you have any questions in between, pop them in the chat. And I think, Haley, it's up to you. The floor is yours. I'll stop my presentation so you can share your slides, and this will go smoothly without a doubt.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you Levi and the team at DeedMop for inviting me to be part of the session today. So I am from an organisation called Keystone Marketing. We're based in Cambridgeshire, and we work all over the country to help organisations with their marketing strategy and their community engagement. Now, I'm going to talk you through a couple of different things in my 15 minutes this morning. Firstly, how we have worked with the incredible team at Support Cambridgeshire to help them bring their volunteer portal to life, but also to share some insights with you in terms of some of the top tips for recruiting and retaining either your current or future volunteers within your own settings. Now, we talked about things going very, very smoothly, and just to say, Levi, I'm not able to share my screen currently in my preferences, so I don't know if that's something that you can just sort of provide access to. Here we go. So I'm now sort of set to co-host. So I've just got a few slides to be able to share with you today. Thank you for that. You can tell it's live, can't you? Absolutely. Okay. So here we go. So hopefully you should be able to see my screen here. And I'm just going to run through, as I say, those two particular areas, which will hopefully give you some food for thought for your own projects and initiatives moving forward. So as I said, we're based in Cambridgeshire. We work all over the country, and our focus is very much on helping organisations think about engaging their audiences and ignite communities. And we do that in two different ways. So we work with B2B organisations to help them define and execute really strong and solid marketing strategies. And we use those marketing skill sets to create community engagement campaigns for local government, not-for-profit and public sector. So I'm going to talk to you, as I say, about the work that we were able to deliver with Support Cambridgeshire here in Cambridgeshire to help them bring their volunteer portal to life. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the challenge they set us, the approach we took to then develop them a really, really strong and stringent campaign to, in essence, give that portal an identity, to bring it to life, to launch it, and to help that in sort of embedment within the local community. And before I give you some of those sort of wider top tips. So Support Cambridgeshire, and of course we've got the brilliant Sally here, so she can tell you more about the organisation. But in essence, it will resonate with lots of you because lots of you run similar things in your parts of the country as well, all around helping community groups and organisations strengthen and grow, and looking at those better outcomes for those organisations and their beneficiaries across the area that they serve. And ultimately, Support Cambridgeshire is all about creating a more robust and vibrant voluntary and community sector, and the volunteer portal is very much now part of that. But last year, when the team came to us, they were really keen to understand how marketing strategy and community engagement approaches could support the development of their portal. So like yourself, Support Cambridgeshire had worked in the space in a long time, knows deeply how important volunteers are to the organisations that they support. And of course, with the drive to digital more widely now throughout all of our lives, they knew that the development of a portal would be a really, really strong outreach and engagement tool. But it was new. It was something that hadn't been done in Cambridgeshire before. People weren't expecting it. It didn't have an identity. And so we needed to think about how we could bring that idea to life. And you'll see there on the right-hand side the challenge that we were set. So how could we ensure buy-in and engagement from across the sector and also the wider community that these organisations and volunteers live and work in? So we wanted to be able to engage with the volunteer organisations themselves that would benefit from the platform. We needed to think about what sector partners would be those sort of true champions and advocates of it, but also how could we make this portal become something that was valued and engaged with within the local community more widely, in the knowledge that there's a lot of noise out there. You know, I work in marketing, so our role here at Keystone is all about how we can strengthen those relationships and cut through that noise. But it can be a challenge. There's a lot of demands on individuals' time and attention now. We also needed to make sure we really built credibility in this portal from the beginning and gain commitment from both those current volunteers that were delivering great things for Cambridgeshire, but also that potential volunteer base across the region. So what I'm going to talk through now is the process that we went through and the impact we saw it make. And then from there to give you a sense as to some of those kind of top tips that you'd be able to take away for any of your own initiatives in the future. So we started with a collaborative workshop. So we knew that to create an effective strategy here, the most valuable resource that this platform had was its people. So the people within Support Cambridgeshire that were investing the time and effort in building the platform, the people that ran the organisations that were making such a big difference locally, and the people that we wanted to engage with. And so actually getting buy-in from those kind of like, you know, senior leaders and decision makers and advocates within the sector right from the beginning was really crucial. So this is before it had a name, it had a brand, it had any messaging, it had any strategy around it. And we know how powerful it can be to get people in a room together. And actually, so that's the first thing we did. We ran a face-to-face collaborative workshop with the team from Support Cambridgeshire, but also they invited a number of different people to get involved in that. So those that were at the grassroots, the coalface of the volunteer community, those that were volunteers themselves, as well as those that were running organisations that had a volunteer output. And we set a number of different discussions. And so we were truly trying to get sort of under the hood of the volunteer mindset. So, you know, this is something that the sector live and breathe all the time. But for us, we really wanted to hear it for the first time. So you think about how we could then infuse the strategy with those key mindset tools. So what were their motivations? What were their barriers? What impact did they make? Could they make? What were the opportunities for them to grow? And then we were saying, right, and how can the portal help this? And how can the marketing help this? We then asked them tell us about the volunteer experience. So what challenges do volunteers have? What opportunities do they have? You know, what's the potential impact for them? And then asking the organisations, well, what challenges do you have in terms of generating your volunteer support and so on? And again, how can the portal help that? And again, how can the marketing draw attention to that and get that buy-in? We then did some work to try and understand personas. So, you know, what might this volunteer look like? So we had lots of different personas we looked at, because as we know, volunteers come in all shapes and sizes with different skill sets, with different backgrounds, with different interests. But if we could try and encapsulate all of those different personas from a brand and marketing perspective, we could then start to identify what were going to be the visual hooks to engage them and what were going to be the messages that would resonate with those audiences. We also then started to think about exactly, you know, what that portal wanted to be, that digital hub, that online space. What did the Support Cambridgeshire team and all of its advocates want people to feel when they went in there? What did we want that brand to look like? What messages did we want to play a part for them on their journey? And from that workshop, we were able to put together a very detailed marketing strategy. So you can see some examples of that there. That then enabled us to write tailored messaging for the portal, to give it a name and a strapline, and so it's known as VolunteerCambs, and we gave it a unique visual identity, and I'm going to show you some examples of some of those things. But the VolunteerCambs brand identity, at the heart of it is that logo, and you can see we came up with a number of different suggestions, but we ended up deciding on the route that showed that speech bubble, and with the exclamation at the end, there's almost like that call to action, that call to arms, you know, come and volunteer in Cambridgeshire. And we wanted there to be quite a bit of impact and strength in that call to action, because ultimately we wanted to use that as a hook to get people to come in and be part of it. And we also wanted to create a strapline. So actually, you know, the sector was aware that this portal was being produced. It was aware that there was a need to get volunteers, but actually what was going to be the one key message that would resonate with those people that we wanted to engage. So we developed a strapline, match your precious time to local good causes. And that was a direct impact from the workshop, because we were really mindful that actually for current volunteers, but also for those that could potentially be valuable volunteers in the future, it is that they're giving up their time and their skills, but it does make a huge impact to the good causes that they support. So we wanted a strapline that accounted for both of those things, the importance and the value of the volunteer and the impact that they make to the good causes. So from the workshop, that tailored messaging, really understanding those different audiences that we wanted to engage with, giving it an identity, we were then able to create a number of promotional assets. So you can see an example of those there. So that strapline you see became kind of like the heart and soul of so many of the marketing materials. We were able to think about actually how, you know, that the volunteer portal, the message could change in different parts of Cambridgeshire. So we came up with this sort of striking strapline of make your mark to really appeal to those individuals. And depending on where this message appeared, we could either talk about making your mark in the whole of Cambridgeshire, or we could talk about making your mark in a particular area, because we also know volunteers will often like to support their own local communities in the place that they live and work. So drawing attention to that was something that was really important to us. I talked at the beginning about actually how important it is to think about, you know, getting a wider sector to buy into this and think about who your partners and your stakeholders and your advocates are. Now, of course, we're really mindful of budget. So, you know, we are not big businesses here. You know, we're not like the Innocent Smoothie or the Coca-Cola that can placard everywhere with these messages and with these materials. And so we knew that partners across the sector also played a role here to get their buy-in, but also to use their channels and platforms to get the message out too. So what we also did in terms of this launch campaign is we created a stakeholder toolkit. And in the run-up to the launch, we contacted a huge number of people across Cambridgeshire, which we knew either had the links with the audience that we were wanting to engage with, or that we knew had the links with the sector, or that had links to wider business as well. And we said to them, we need your help. And we gave them assets and toolkits and materials that they could then use to be part of the launch of this portal, which enabled us to get the message out in a much more impactful way, because we weren't just limited by the budgets or the channels for Support Cambridgeshire. We could call on the local community to help us engage too. And then we developed that cross-county launch. So using, you know, that brand name that was identified, the strapline, the messaging, the understanding of the audiences, the assessment of all of the channels and platforms from a marketing perspective we could use. We coordinated that cross-county launch for the team at Support Cambridgeshire to mean that on that day that they launched earlier this year, they could make an incredible splash. And we worked with them for those first few weeks to really help them roll that out. And then that whole point of a toolkit was then really valuable for them as well. And Sally will talk more about this in her session. They were able to then take all the assets that we'd created for them, all of the unpicking we'd done with the strategy, to then pick all of that up and then start running with it. So we use analogies quite a lot here at Keystone, and I guess this one was a bit of a relay race. So we took that first sprint, get it to launch, and then the team at Support Cambridgeshire were able to take that on and truly embed it and create those strong foundations from launch into continuing delivery. And Sally will talk more about that as well. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the top tips around marketing with that kind of volunteer message, and some examples of some really interesting stats as well that might help to bring it to life. But just as a sort of a pause between one part of the presentation to the another, I just wanted to share this quote with you, which I thought was really powerful. Volunteers do not necessarily have the time, they just have the heart. And that really resonated with me for this campaign, and I'm sure it will with all of you as well. So let's look at some key marketing considerations for when you're looking to recruit new volunteers. And there's some examples of those things there, and very much from our learning of running the project with Cambridgeshire. So building those volunteer personas. So that word volunteer, we debated this actually in the workshop itself, can sometimes be seen as a negative because there's connotations of that word volunteer, and people think, oh my goodness, what are we, what are we letting ourselves in for here? And it's not one size fits all in terms of the volunteer experience or the background and the personality and persona of that volunteer as well. So think about building out those different personas if you are looking at recruiting new volunteers. Give them a name, actually, give them an age, think about where they might live, really bring them to life, and then you can test bed all of your engagement and marketing approaches against that. Also think about where your audiences are. For our launch for Support Cambridgeshire, we were covering the whole of the area, but actually each town, each village has its own personality as well, and we really wanted to draw on that and refer to those local audiences. We also needed to think about where they were. Would we find them digitally? Would we find them at a market? Would we find them at a pop-up event in their local Tesco's, for instance? So really think about where those audiences are and make sure that you're being seen and engaging in the places where they are. It's really important to develop strong messaging as well. So, have a look at what your call to action is for your volunteer message at the moment, and create something distinct with real standout and real strong calls to action. Make it easy for those volunteers to get in touch, but make it really clear what you're asking them to do. And then there's a real benefit in creating a brand personality. Now, that can't always be visual. There isn't always the budget to be able to do that, but you can think about it in terms of your tone of voice. You can think about it in terms of the images that you perhaps use whenever you're talking about volunteering. And also, have a think about demonstrating the impact that those volunteers are making as part of that messaging as well. So just pulling out a few stats for you, the UK publication Volunteer Now has said that organisations saw an 18% increase in volunteer sign-ups when their recruitment messaging emphasised the impact. So just make sure your messaging is looking at that. There's some more marketing considerations as well. So I've touched on this already. Make it really easy for people to engage. Think about multi-purposing your content. So write it once, use it lots. If you're stuck with time and you're really limited, actually you want to roll out that same content as much as you can. Think about building your army of advocates, a bit like we did with Support Cambridgeshire. So who else is an influencer within the local environment that you could connect to? And be consistent. You need to keep thinking about banging that drum. And finally, the other side of the coin, of course, is retaining your volunteers. So actually what you don't want is a leaky bucket. You don't want to have all this great work going in to get new volunteers and then them all falling away at the end. So actually, there's a few things here that's mentioned as well. So I'll let you have a look at that on the screen. And just a few things to let you know about. You guys will probably know NAVCO. They, in one of their reports, highlight that 40% of volunteers are recruited through personal recommendations and word of mouth from current volunteers. volunteers. So that piece there around considering referrals is really important. And 60% of volunteers, also found by NAVCO, are more likely to continue volunteering for extended periods if they receive regular follow-up and communication. So that power of thank you and telling their stories and recognising what they do are all ways to demonstrate the value those volunteers make to your base. And finally there, just ask them, ask them what they really enjoy about volunteering, ask them what you guys might be able to do to strengthen that experience for them, and just make sure you keep that open communication. And ultimately that's what marketing is all about. So it's that essence of communication. So that's as far as I wanted to be able to take things for you today. I hope there's some really interesting elements in there that you can take on board. I think there'll be some things that you recognise in there yourselves that you can potentially take from here. But thank you again to Levi for asking me to be part of it today. And I will now pass back to him for the next part of the session.
Well, thank you so much, Hayley. Lots of things really resonated with me. I think the thing that resonated most is just to ask them about their experiences, about referrals. So often we're stuck behind our desks, stuck behind our screens, trying to mold everything into processes. And then oftentimes we forget that the human element, just having these one-on-one connections is what gives us the most insights. But without a doubt, a lot of tips that if everybody receives the recording and presentation afterwards, without a doubt, there is some stuff in there that they can easily get started with. And I guess they also can connect with you if there are any more in-depth questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't share my last slide though. I had a QR code actually to my LinkedIn profile, but yeah, please do. Always happy to have a chat with any of you just to kind of give you our sense of things or to help you work through a particular challenge. So yeah, do find me on LinkedIn. So it's Hayley Williams at Keystone Marketing. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to share that afterwards. Now, Sally, you've been here for 30 minutes and you're just prepped and psyched and ready to go, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, I'll just quickly share my slides so I can introduce myself. Stay with me. Sorry, I'm just getting a pop-up saying I can't share my slide when I click on it.
I can try and remake you a co-host. I'm not sure how Leoba fixed that for. Let me try again. Is it working now? And otherwise, I'll just pop in the email and take your slides and present it or share it for you.
No, sorry, it isn't. It's saying I can't share them. I can
All
introduce myself whilst you maybe, if you've got my slides, Levi, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, I can talk a bit anyway without them, to be honest. So as mentioned, I'm Sally. So I'm Deputy at Cambridge Council for Voluntary Service, which is CCVS. But we work in partnership with Hunts Forum and other CVS in the county to deliver a partnership called Support Cambridgeshire. So that's the work that Hayley's been mentioning. And under Support Cambridgeshire, pretty much this year, time last year, we launched VolunteerCambs to the voluntary sector first of all, which is our kind of website all around volunteering. So providing that platform for groups to put their opportunities and for the public to find them. Today I wanted to just talk to you about our experience over the past year and kind of what we've learned from that, what our approach has been around volunteer recruitment and how we're trying to support groups in that area, and just, you know, our kind of engagement with the public and how we've shaped that, linked to the messaging that Hayley kind of kicked us off with all the branding.
I think it's working now, sharing your presentation.
Yeah.
Not sure how many work you put into the last couple of details, but we'll probably make this work.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I think I rejigged it a bit, but we'll go for it. I'm just chatting about the year, so I'm sure it'll be fine. So I think just to kind of start us off, so before VolunteerCambs, I think a lot of you here are CVSs, so just to explain how we were working around volunteering first. So our kind of focus was really around kind of supporting volunteer managers, so like running a network, doing kind of one-to-one support on volunteer recruitment, and running some training as well. We had some more focused work just in Cambridge City around supporting people who struggle to get into volunteering because of barriers they face, maybe around mental health or kind of confidence. But that was very focused and specific to Cambridge City. So VolunteerCambs was a really exciting move for us because it gave us this hook to really talk about volunteering across the county. But if we go on to the next slide. So what I'll do is just first of all explain kind of how we tried to, I suppose, take the torch, as Hayley was saying, with the promotion to continue that momentum, because it was amazingly helpful having Keystone really kind of give us that push with the launch, and give us all those resources that we could then continue to use around visibility for VolunteerCambs. So to kind of explain what we did. So essentially we tried to think about the fact that there's different channels to reach people, and there isn't one kind of volunteer. They're not all on Facebook, they're not all reading the local newspaper. So we tried to do a mixed approach depending on who we were targeting in the area of the county that we were working in. So we launched some different digital platforms. So LinkedIn and Facebook are the two that we have at the moment. And the decision to use those was very much based on advice, to be honest, from other DeedMob platforms for starters, as well as kind of marketing companies and our knowledge of the area as well. So Facebook we've used to kind of create a bit of a community, to share best practice around volunteering and very much target the public. And it has been working quite well in relation to getting people to VolunteerCambs. So at the moment, this month anyway, it's the second highest source of visitors to the website. So that's really, really exciting. And then for LinkedIn, we've been mainly focusing on the voluntary sector, that I guess are our kind of core audience more as a CVS. So through that channel, we've been sharing kind of the support that we can give to groups, guidance on volunteer recruitment, and also the stories around volunteering as well. That's kind of been a thread throughout the process. But those two platforms have enabled us to kind of keep content fresh, share kind of events and training that we're putting on, and just try and reach people that maybe we, weren't reaching before we had this website. And to kind of build on that, we are using kind of printed press, which Hayley mentioned before, and also some radio. I would say that's something we'd love to do more on in the longer term. And hopefully if we kind of build our capacity as a charity, we'll be able to develop that more. But just to give you an idea of how it's worked. So within our county, we have Fenland, which is quite a rural place. We were lucky enough to have some additional funding to have some staff based in Fenland, helping to promote volunteering and just talk about VolunteerCambs as part of that work. So we could channel some kind of resource into finding like really significant local press or magazines that could raise the profile of VolunteerCambs. So on the slide, we've got a kind of one pager that we put into a very popular magazine that goes into hundreds of letterboxes. And the event that they were promoting, pretty much everyone who was there saw it through this magazine and weren't people that we already knew. So the kind of impact of that was really, really great. And I think you can see having the brand and the colours and the look just really helps things pop out when we're trying to promote VolunteerCambs. So that's been a really interesting learning experience and has helped us, think about the fact that if we're smart about it, it's really worth the investment. So another one we've put into recently is WI. They have a kind of, I think it's an annual magazine, and we thought that's a really good group of people to highlight VolunteerCambs to. So we're doing it, having to be a bit picky just because of resource, but it's something that we're much more confident with now and can see with VolunteerCambs that it makes a real difference to reaching more people in order for them to volunteer, and hopefully find them through volunteer. So these kind of resources have been really helpful, but then we've made sure not to underestimate the need for kind of people and talking to people. So if we go on to the next slide, I've got lots of photos of the team. So you may be in the same situation, but really VolunteerCambs has been embedded into our work. So something that's been really important is that the whole team have been on board. Everyone is super passionate about volunteering within our charities. And so whenever we've been able and, had capacity, we've been going out and talking to people, either taking part in events that are already happening or putting on our own. And again, that very much depends on the capacity with the team. But I think the photos just give you a bit of a snapshot into our summer, which was quite a busy one, I have to say, but it's been really, really fun. So we've been at kind of summer fairs, we've been at kind of community events, we've been invited to things through kind of our stakeholders like City Council, County Council, all because they've heard about VolunteerCambs initially from that first push, but then on a continuous basis from us reaching out to them and trying to build partnerships to help us get word out there. And again, you can really see the difference the branding's made for these events, because we're able to really stand out and have images that people can start to recognise. We've also been kind of putting on our own events. So in the top left, we're holding a kind of coffee morning where groups will come and talk about their volunteering opportunities, and public can just drop in and chat to them about it. So that's really about kind of trying to break down barriers and just make volunteering a little bit more friendly. And then we've also got the volunteer fairs, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And we've tried different approaches. So some have been in Tesco, where people can just walk past and just have a little bit of a chat without any kind of pressure. And then we've had ones that have been more, you know, you rely on people coming more purposefully to that event. So Hunts Forum held one at their centre, but put a really good effort behind their online marketing, which saw really good attendance. So it's really interesting for us to see different approaches to that kind of volunteer recruitment, and that they can work in different ways depending on the area that you're in. So that's been a really nice learning curve for us. And if we go on to the next slide, I just wanted to talk to you a bit about kind of the support for groups that we've been giving around VolunteerCambs. So this is building on our kind of standard work, if you like, before we had this platform to kind of really talk about volunteering and provide a place for people to go. And we knew that a really big part of this succeeding would be getting the groups on the site and getting them feel comfortable, happy to use it, adding their opportunities. You know, I've managed volunteers, I've recruited them. I know time is precious, and at one point there's various different online platforms that you're meant to be using, and it gets a bit overwhelming and you don't get good quality applications. And so therefore, is it worth your time? So we had to kind of really tackle that and say, we've heard from you that you need volunteers. You really want to engage new people in your good cause. This is the platform that you can use, and this is how you can use it. So again, we've been trying things over the last year with ideas coming from, again, other DeedMob platforms and conversations with other kinds of charities and DeedMob obviously themselves. And we've tried this kind of different approach. So we've had webinars where we've talked through, you know, the basics, if you like, walking groups through how to use the site. We've done kind of smaller sessions, which are kind of half-an-hour snippets looking at particular areas, just trying to highlight the different features in the site that you can use to help you recruit, maybe in a slightly different way than you have before. And then we've used those resources to snip them up essentially into recordings and create a little on-demand section on the website so that people can just kind of go and watch them and use them however is helpful. And we're very much still learning. You know, some things, numbers have been stronger than others, but our view on it is we're trying to make it as easy as possible. So just having those things available is going to be useful in the longer term as well, and we can edit them and update them. And then on top of that, it's again down to that kind of relationship. So we've had the inbox that I've been looking after, phone calls, half-an-hour one-to-ones on video calls that are often the most helpful way of like getting someone over a barrier that they've come across and they've got confused on the site or whatever. And that kind of package of support, I think, has been really, really essential, kind of building that relationship with the group so they can come to us and ask for help. And if they need to come in and have a face-to-face, then we can do that. So it's just to kind of say that, you know, that support there has been essential. And it's also helped us really have that conversation with groups about how they recruit volunteers or what their roles are and whether they're thinking about the volunteer when they're putting that opportunity up. The really nice thing about the DeedMob sites, it has those prompts. So when we're thinking about volunteering opportunities, you can break them down to tasks or events. And just having that in a screen when you're talking to a group means you can say, have you thought about doing that as like a short-term opportunity, or hosting an event where volunteers can come and help you out and get a bit of a feel for your charity. And it just helps to kind of start that conversation a bit more, so that maybe the volunteers, the organisations might think about things a little differently. But yes, if we go on to the next slide. So that's kind of like how we're talking to groups and how we're talking to the public. So just to explain where we've got to. So as I mentioned, kind of this time last year, we launched the voluntary organisations. They put their opportunities up, and then we launched to the public in February. And that was brilliant, really like buzzy atmosphere, and Keystone were fantastic helping us with that. And we've kind of continued that process of trying to keep the conversation going. So at the minute, we've got over 1,000 volunteers registered on the site looking for opportunities, about 900 applications received, and about 190 people have volunteered. And you can kind of see the other numbers on the slide, but essentially we can see the kind of interest going up, if you like. And if we go on to the next slide, we've got a couple of graphs that just help show that. Sorry, I think it's the next slide, yeah. And so essentially we can kind of see that users are registering on the site and applications are also coming in. And I think that's the thing that we just didn't know whether that was going to happen. It was a bit of a shot in the dark. We knew that we wanted to do something to help the sector, to help people find opportunities that suited them. And we've been able to kind of keep the conversation going to help these numbers going up. And the opportunities that have been successful from the start in relation to applications have been those shorter term opportunities, or ones that really explain how they can be flexible or enable somebody to learn new skills. So we can take that learning and talk to groups about it to enable them to feel more confident in how they're, you know, promoting their roles. And if we go on to the next slide, just to kind of bring that together, I suppose, things we're learning, and we're definitely still learning as we go, is just the fact that having this site and having a place to promote has been really helpful. And I think that's for us as well as for the groups using it. You know, some of the smaller groups don't necessarily have a website. They might mainly rely on Facebook or not feel very confident with their digital skills. So us being able to support them in using a site and writing a role description in a very practical way has been helpful. And in relation to how we recruit or find people, we're very much keeping in mind really what we've learned from kind of the Keystone team as well, around thinking about who we're trying to reach so that we can go to them. So that very much relates to those kind of printed press, doing the radio interviews with really small community groups to reach people that might otherwise not know about the site. So we're just keeping that in mind as we go. And I think from the stats, we can really see that people do want to volunteer, but a lot of it is around finding something that's a good match for them. So just trying to keep that conversation with the groups as well as the volunteers around, you know, volunteering is for everybody and there is something out there, and hopefully we can help them find that, and for both sides to kind of express, you know, what either they're looking for to make volunteering a success really in the county. But I think that's what I wanted to talk through, but really happy to chat about it because it feels like we've done quite a lot in a year, and interesting to hear what other people's experiences are as well. But I think the next one's my last slide, Levi. Sorry for the next slide section. So just to say that across all of this, kind of storytelling has been key. So we've got a section on the website where we share volunteering stories. We've been sharing those through our kind of online platforms, and just as a way to kind of really highlight the difference that volunteering makes to the person, the community, the group, the county, and that continuous kind of messaging has just been really, really helpful and made it feel much more personable. So I think that's something that I will definitely take away from this whole journey, if you like. But thank you. Happy to answer questions, and if you want to have a look at our social media, do, or if you ever want to get in touch and have a chat about it more, that's also would be great.
Well, thank you so much, Sally. I do remember the launch of VolunteerCambs, the public launch, and it was also on one of your slides a bit back. This is actually a pretty well-known person in the area, right?
Yes, this is the mayor for the county. So yeah, we managed to, and that was Hayley, you were very involved with that. I think there was like emails flying around of like photo shoots and various things, and you can see, yeah, the website in the background. So getting those people on board was really, really helpful, because we have some brilliant images now, but also they do talk. So that's really useful.
Yeah, but this is an awesome best practice. This is not just because it's the mayor and there's a bit of like power and visibility behind it, but at the same time, it also shows you how you were ready to raise the image of volunteering in general within the region by showing and getting everybody involved in this sense. I remember saying to the team, like, they even got the mayor on a picture. So this is so awesome. So thanks for sharing these best practices. If there are any questions, pop them in the chat. I do already have a two-parter, and you can both answer those questions. The first part of my question would be, if you did the research into like the collaborative workshop where you focused on volunteer needs, is it, and this is what we hear quite often, is that there's this big need about flexible volunteering opportunities, short term. Was that also part of the insights that you got from the volunteer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, shall I chip in, Hayley? And then, yeah, I mean, I think we knew from, I guess, quite national research around kind of what volunteers were looking for, as you say, around the time commitment side of things. And I think in the workshops themselves, our focus group was mainly the voluntary sector groups themselves, but a lot of them also volunteered. And I think they were very aware that the kind of ongoing organizational roles was something that just doesn't fit for everybody, or they were recruiting and then people were leaving and people just couldn't commit because maybe their lifestyle had changed because of, you know, needing to look after grandkids and whatnot. So it's definitely something they were aware of, but also aware that it's quite difficult sometimes to shift the way that you manage volunteers for various different reasons. So we've been always walking that line of encouraging but supporting, I suppose, to kind of think about those roles differently.
Yeah. So Hayley, the second part would be for you, is do you see from the organization, like the volunteering involving organization perspective, that there's still a big need for long-term commitment to different roles?
I think absolutely. You know, I see in my personal life how important volunteers are, you know, at a grassroots level. You know, my children are all involved in sport, all of their coaches, all of their trainers are all volunteers. And so actually it's such a part of our community. And I think we either are all volunteers ourselves or we know someone that volunteers. And when you experience those things, you realise actually how strong that makeup is and how important it is. But there are some barriers. So actually those long-term commitments are incredibly important around the legacy and impact that those organisations can make. But we had to be really mindful in that kind of that workshop scenario, is that there are some connotations and some barriers out there, and almost people didn't even want to say, okay, I'll do one thing then, because they feel that they're going to then get, you know, almost overwhelmed, and the expectations will be on them to do more and more and more. So very much in the messaging, it was around actually that whole matching your precious time. You know, even if you can just give a little, it makes a big impact. And we also know through some of those long-term volunteers that once they do start volunteering, they really love it and they're really engaged with it, and then they want to do more and more and more. So yes, long-term is important, but what we would never want it to be is a barrier. And so our whole focus was just around trying to get people to think about it, which is why we had that message for the launch campaign around making your mark. So, you know, everybody can make a mark in volunteering, even if it's just for a small amount of time. It makes a big difference. And yes, long term is important, but also, yeah, whatever you can do to make your mark makes a big impact.
Right, thank you. Question from the chat: if you could tell a bit more about the volunteer personas that you created.
So I guess I can start with this, Sally, and then maybe you could draw a little bit more attention to what those different volunteer personas are. But this was one of the discussions that we went through in the workshop. So we were mindful that our marketing had to appeal to a very broad audience. So we needed something that was going to work across the board, but we also wanted to engage with those different audiences. And so we asked in the workshop, we asked the delegates that were part of it to give us examples of the different sorts of volunteers that they have within their organisation. So, we'd say to them, okay, what gender might they be? What age might they be? Whereabouts in the county might they be based? Do they work? Are they a parent? Do they work from home, or do they, leave the area day to day for work and so on? So we tried to build up this kind of demographic picture of them in terms of who they were as an individual, where they lived, what their interests were, how much time they had available, and then to think about where we could access them. So was that digitally or was it in a face-to-face environment? So as much of a picture as we could build of that individual personality as we could, to really help us then bench check the messaging against that. So I don't think we did this for you, Sally, but sometimes when we do audience personas and profiles, we give them names and we find a stock picture. So that can be really helpful as well. So if you're looking to build your own volunteer personas, you might have a volunteer at the moment where you're like, we just want more Bobs. We love Bob. Bob is brilliant. We want more Bobs. So let's make Bob our persona. Let's put his picture there. Let's talk about how old he is, his journey to get to you, what his interests are and so on. And then if you are using digital, you can then put all of that demographic profiling into Meta for, say, Facebook and Instagram. And you can say to those platforms, find me people like this. So find me males of a certain age based in a certain part of the area that have got these particular interests, and the system will find you those lookalike audience and show your message to them. And if you're really clear that that persona is right and you're really clear that your message is right, you connect those two things together and you're likely to make the connection that you need to make. So it's a really powerful tool, and it's an easy one to get started with because you can just take some of your own brilliant volunteers to create those first personas for you.
Did that answer your question? You're in the meeting as Go for Hearts, but if I remember correctly, your name is Emily?
Yeah, it's Emily. Sorry, I realised my name wasn't there. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I wondered how much you'd sort of gone into that level of detail, and obviously that really helps from a marketing perspective. And I guess I also wondered whether we're about inclusion around that as well, and reaching out to a wide variety of people, that we just need to keep that in mind at the same time. But it does sound like that's a really, really helpful approach to help kind of visualize who it is we're trying to talk to, and therefore how to go about approaching that conversation. So thank you very much.
Awesome. All right, so we're well within time. 5 minutes left. We went through it in a pretty fast. We really had the momentum, even with the struggles on the technical side of things. Turns out that it was actually one button that I didn't enable for this session, but we can only learn. Before I leave you to it, Sally, I have one remaining question for you. What is in the works for the next 6 months to a year in regards to volunteer camps?
Well, I suppose the main thing is at the minute is continuing the momentum. So trying to attend new things. So Christmas is exciting. We've got like a stall at John Lewis, that kind of thing to keep that conversation going. And just thinking about what elements of volunteering you want to put the spotlight on. And I know we chat to other DeepMob platforms about this, but how we have conversations around young people volunteering, trustee opportunities, how we work with companies and corporates around their kind of volunteering time, and just trying to build those relationships and cement this as a kind of go-to for people in Cambridgeshire. So yeah, quite a few things, I suppose, irons in the fire, but mainly just trying to build that support for groups and the public to use the site in a meaningful way, and then trying to see what's working and adapt and do what we can to make it continue being a success, really.
Great. All very relevant topics. We'll be back in November as well with another session where we will zoom out a bit more, look at some of the trends within our sector. So lot of the stuff that you mentioned, Sally, will be discussed there. How to engage younger people, get them into volunteering, actually capture the momentum that is already there. How to work with specific target groups, from trustees to trying to find new ways to engage trustees. Like, is our remote opportunity something to explore further? Working together with corporates, impact measurement. We have the works, but we'll also circle back via email with the recording, with the slides, and the contact details of both Sally and Haley. So if during the week you have another thought or another challenge or question popping up, feel free to reach out, because only if we can keep the conversation going, that's where we will get new insights. It's so easy to bury deep into the work that you have, but thank you everybody for joining and sharing your insights, Sami and Haley. Have an awesome rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.